Namo Phat. Good morning. Thank you for joining me for our daily practice check-in. Listen, listen, listen. This beautiful sound calls us back to our true home. The first mindfulness training. Aware of the suffering caused by the destruction of life, I vow to cultivate compassion and learn ways to protect the lives of people, animals, plants, and minerals. I am determined not to kill, not to let others kill, and not to condone any act of killing in the world, in my thinking, or in my way of life. We've been reading a book by the nuns of Amaravati called The Body, Dhamma Reflections on Aging, Illness, and Death. And we're now reading a Dhamma talk by Ajahn Metta called The Gradual Path. So, what does the Third Noble Truth say? Here, the focus of investigation is the fact that there is an end to suffering. When I heard the teachings about cessation for the first time, that it was possible not to suffer anymore, I was delighted, but I also thought, this goal is so far away. There's so far to go to reach the complete enlightenment. But again, the good news is that cessation happens every day. We just have to look in that direction. Where does it actually happen in our daily lives? When do you experience cessation? In what moments do you experience it? And I'm sure you all do. It's just that we don't often recognize it as such, because it's not a big deal. It's not necessarily a blazing light or anything related to the deeper levels of practice. It happens at the end of a sentence, like now. Cessation. It's in the end of a conversation with your friend. Cessation. It's the end of your meal. Cessation. It's the end of an emotional experience. Cessation. I think that turning our practice in that direction, recognizing when cessation happens, can bring something very different into our lives. It means we are not bound so much by suffering. There is a way out, and we can actually experience it in this moment. We can even do this when we go through a long period of suffering. For example, when something really major happens in our life, there may be a lot of sadness or emotional pain. But if we look into this more deeply, we can see impermanence there as well. We can know that it is not constant. There are even quite a few cessations which take place during these longer-lasting experiences. I remember one situation where I felt a strong sense of loss, and it was quite painful. There was the experience of loss, the feeling of hurt, of being vulnerable. When we find ourselves in situations like these, it seems they will never end or change. On the surface, it felt like that I was always in that space. But when I looked deeper, I could see that there were moments or situations where the pain was less or even not there at all. Right there is the change, the impermanence. Yes, there is pain and I am in that. But then there are those times when I am not experiencing it. Remembering this, when suffering comes up, I can turn towards it. I can actually hold it, be with it, accept it. Acceptance is one aspect of cessation, and it means that we understand why we attach to a certain experience. There are many reasons. I've just described how it could unfold for any one of us. There came a point in my own experience where I could see that I was afraid of letting go because I was afraid of the unknown. I was afraid of what the next step would be in my life. I knew I had to let go, but I chose to suffer rather than turn towards that undefined openness. Why do we do this? There is the fear that this unknown openness, the uncertainty of it, might be worse than the pain we are now experiencing. It might mean loneliness or finding ourselves in a strange, threatening place, and the result can be a hesitation to connect with others or with the rest of the world for fear of being hurt again. You can see that there is a lot of anticipation in this, which is itself rooted in fear of the unknown. It doesn't feel quite safe, and yet sooner or later we have to step into it. We have to let go of our irrational fears and anticipations. I found time and again that my fear of the unknown was so much more difficult to be with than actually stepping into it. This is just one example of how the process works. We have to fully understand why we are attaching. If we can fully turn towards this attachment, acknowledge it for ourselves, then cessation can happen, but only then. If we don't acknowledge the roots of our attachment, cessation can't and won't happen. This is a very important thing to understand. May all beings be well. May all beings be happy. May all beings be peaceful. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you for joining me this morning.